Hey, 7th graders, if you're watching this video, it's because you've already completed this worksheet. So you should have done everything you could to answer all these questions. And now that you're finished, you should be watching the video. And a reminder, you can use a calculator to solve these problems. So if you didn't use a calculator or you haven't solved it yet, please go back and do that. Okay, I'm just going to kind of go over how I solved this problem. I'll read the word problem and explain what I did. It says, Fonda is selling wrapping paper to raise money for her school's dance team. This year, the selling price for each roll of wrapping paper is $10.26. The price this year represents 8% more than the selling price of each roll of wrapping paper last year. So what I'm thinking right now is this year's $10.26 is more than what it was last year. So when I'm figuring out last year's cost, it should be less than $10.26. And it asked me, what's the selling price of each roll of wrapping paper? Well, I know that my part is going to be the $10.26. It can't be my whole because I can't, if I find 108% of $10.26, then my price is going to go up and I know it has to be going down. So I want to figure out this $10.26 is 108% of the original cost. So I want to find the original cost, which is 100. So I have my part being $10.26 and my percent is 108. I'm trying to figure out my whole. So what I need to do is I have $10.26 equals, and I have to make sure it's a decimal, 1.08. I divide each side by 1.08 and I get $9.50. This seems like a reasonable answer. It's a little bit less than my price this year, and it's only 8% less, and this year was 8% more. So part A is $9.50. Part B gets a little bit harder. It says Fonda's dance team earned 30% of the money they received from selling these rolls of wrapping paper. So we've got to figure out how much profit they make and then what's 30% of that profit. They sold 530 rolls of wrapping paper last year, and they sold 490 rolls of wrapping paper this year. So if I'm looking at last year, I need to take the price that I found right here of $9.50. So I know that last year they sold it for $9.50, which we see right here. And they sold 530 of them, which means they made $5,035. But they don't get to keep that $5,035. They only get to keep 30% of it. And this is my bad. There's something that's wrong right here, so just bear with me. So in your part percent whole, this $5,035 should go right here under this whole. I'm not sure why it isn't, and that's my bad. So I know that the whole amount that they sold last year was $5,035. That would be my whole. And they're paying 30% of that cost. So you'll see my equation down here. 0.3 or 30% of $5,035 gave me $1,510.50. So I know that that's the amount of money that they made from last year. Now I need to find the amount they made this year. It's the same process. There are 490 rolls, and they're each sold at $10.26. And so I do $490 times $10.26, and I end up with $5,027.4 or 40 cents. Again, this is the amount that they made from selling the wrapping paper, but they only get to keep 30% of it. So I have to do the same thing, my part percent whole. They're going to keep 30%, and it says 3, it should be 0.3 or 30. 30% of $5,027.40. So I do 0.3 times $5,027.40, and I get $1,508.22. Here are my two prices. Last year, they made $1,510.50 when they were selling wrapping paper for a cheaper price. This year, when it was more expensive, they made $1,508.22. They made about the same. Now I have to figure out which one of these statements is true. So what I'm going to do is, it seems like it's talking about the difference between the amount of money they make. Well, I know that if I subtract $1,510.50 minus $1,508.22, I get $2.28. So I'm going to eliminate A and B. And then it's asking, Fonda's dance team earned $2.28 more this year than last year, or that amount more last year than this year. So I have to look at my amounts. This one right here, the 1,510, is from last year, and the cheaper price, or the less money earned is from this year. So I know that they made more money last year than this year, which would give me D as my final answer. If you have any questions, please write that on your paper. Like, hey, Miss Miller, I still totally don't get what you're talking about. Or like, can you explain this one part? And then when I'm going around checking your paper, I can give you feedback on those specific parts. Good luck.